Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some truly incredible science, specifically focusing on the complete experimental methodology presented by Dr. Kemetav for the preparation of edible films from gelatin. We're going to break down the actual step-by-step data behind how an everyday kitchen ingredient is being transformed into a robust, completely edible alternative to plastic packaging.
Seriously, just imagine that for a second. You buy fresh fruit or a block of cheese, and instead of throwing the plastic wrap into the trash, you just eat it. Or at the very least, you toss it in the garden where it completely vanishes. Now, to understand why this is such a massive deal, we have to look at the mess we're currently in. Right now, a staggering 1/3 of all food produced globally is wasted, mostly because it spoils during transport. To stop that spoilage, we wrap everything in petroleum-based plastics. But those plastics literally never go away, right? They just pile up and pollute the environment. So the stage is perfectly set for an eco-friendly hero to step in.
And believe it or not, that eco-hero is gelatin. It's a biopolymer made by breaking down collagen. Now, you probably know we get it from traditional mammalian sources, like pigskin and cowhide, which dominate the market today. But what's really fascinating here is the sheer diversity of where we can source this stuff. We're talking poultry waste, like chicken feet and feathers. We can use marine waste, like fish scales and fins. Researchers are even extracting high-quality gelatin from insects. Yeah, things like desert locusts. The reason it works so well is because of its structure. Gelatin forms this unique triple helical shape, kind of like a twisted ladder, which gives it these natural built-in film-forming and moisture-blocking superpowers.
So, how exactly do you turn that protein into a plastic-like film? Well, let's walk through the foundational casting methodology that Dr. Kim utilized in the lab. It honestly sounds like a kitchen recipe. You start by mixing 400 grams of water with 10 grams of unflavored gelatin. And, this is the absolute crucial part, 1 teaspoon of food-grade glycerin. That glycerin acts as a plasticizer. Basically, it slips right in between the gelatin molecules to give the final material its flexibility. So, you whisk that continuously, apply heat to bring it to a boil and break down those chemical bonds, and then pour it into a simple mold, like an acetate sheet. Let it dry for a couple of days while the solvent evaporates, and boom! You're left with a solid, perfectly clear, flexible film.
Now, casting a little sheet in a lab is great for Dr. Kem's initial experiments, but if we're going to replace global plastics, we have to scale things up. And this illustrates exactly how the industry does that. To meet commercial demand, manufacturers use intense processes like extrusion and electrospinning. With extrusion, you take that biopolymer mix, feed it into a massive, heated barrel, and force it out through a die using a giant screw. It is incredibly fast and super energy efficient. Then there's electrospinning, which honestly sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. They use a high-voltage power supply to draw the polymer through a tiny metallic needle, whipping it into these ultra-fine submicrometric nanofibers. Because these fibers have such a massive surface area, they're absolutely perfect for trapping active, bacteria-fighting ingredients.
But here's an interesting shift happening in the industry. Manufacturers are actually trying to move away from mammalian gelatin. Why? Well, mostly due to lingering concerns over bovine spongiform illness, mad cow disease, as well as various dietary and religious restrictions globally. So they are looking for alternatives, and fish gelatin is the top contender. It's sourced straight from fishing industry waste, it's beautifully translucent, and it forms great films. However, it does have an inherent flaw. Its rheological properties aren't quite as stable. Basically, its floor and internal structure just aren't as tough as what you'd get from a cow or pig. It has a significantly weaker gelling capacity.
And you can see exactly what I mean right here in this meta-analysis data. If you look at the tensile strength, how much stretching it can take before breaking, a very clear pattern jumps out. Unmodified fish gelatin consistently falls short of mammalian versions. It hovers around 48 megapascals, whereas porcine gelatin easily pushes past 61. So what this data is telling Dr. Kem and other scientists is that we can't just take fish gelatin straight out of the box and expect it to replace heavy-duty plastic. For sure, it needs a serious upgrade. In fact, before gelatin of any kind can take over the grocery aisle, we have to honestly talk about its kryptonite. Gelatin is incredibly sensitive to its environment. If you don't modify it, the film has terrible water vapor barrier properties. Try wrapping a moist piece of fruit in basic gelatin, and the moisture will just bleed right through it. Plus, because of that lower mechanical strength we just talked about, the moment the environment gets a bit humid, the film starts to degrade. Put simply, if things get too wet, your food wrapper literally starts melting.
So, how do we fix that? Enter cross-linking. Think of cross-linking like a heavy-duty armor upgrade for our biopolymer. It's a specific modification process, either chemical or physical, that forces all those loose, wandering protein networks to bind tightly together. By adding certain agents to the mix, scientists basically force the gelatin molecules to lock arms. This single process drastically boosts the structural stability, ramps up the tensile strength, and turns the film into a maze, forcing water vapor to take a much harder, twisted path to get through. Suddenly, you have some serious water resistance.
This is where the science gets really fun, because it's like downloading specific software patches to create the absolute perfect packaging. Depending on the food you want to protect, you add different active ingredients into Dr. Kem's base recipe. We already mentioned glycerol for flexibility, but it also helps filter light. Then you have caffeic acid, which is a plant compound used to block water vapor. Want to stop UV rays from spoiling the food? You add essential oils, like bunium. Or if you want to get really high-tech, you can drop in magnetic iron oxide nanoparticles, which instantly turns your film into an active, bacteria-destroying shield. Let's actually look at how 3 of these perform in the lab.
Okay, first case study. Researchers wanted to solve that massive moisture problem in cold water fish gelatin, so they cross-linked it with caffeic acid. When these plant polyphenols mix with the gelatin in an alkaline environment, they oxidize. It does make the film look a bit darker, but structurally, the hydroxyl groups of the acid react with the amino acids in the gelatin, pulling that network incredibly tight. The result was that at just a 5% concentration, the film became insanely resistant to both oxygen and water vapor. It literally tightened the net so much that moisture just couldn't escape.
For the second case study, let's look at those essential oils, specifically Bunium alpinum and Bunium incrassatum. Researchers infused these right into the gelatin matrix. When they looked at the resulting film under an electron microscope, the results were amazing. The oil droplets completely filled in the microscopic pores and microfractures inside the film. The terpene compounds in the oil bound to the gelatin, effectively turning it into a fortress against UV rays. And by blocking that UV light, this specific film prevents light-induced lipid oxidation, which is just a very fancy scientific way of saying it stops your food from going rancid when it sits in the sun.
And finally, we have what I think is the most futuristic upgrade: nanotechnology. Researchers took a film-forming solution and packed it with magnetic iron oxide nanoparticles. Then they did something wild. They intentionally infected fresh grapes with a nasty bacteria called Staphylococcus aureus, and then wrapped those grapes in the nanocomposite gelatin. The nanoparticles didn't just sit there. They acted as an active defense system, latching onto the microbial cells and literally tearing their structures apart. It proved that these edible films don't just passively sit on your food, they can actively hunt down bacteria to drastically extend the shelf life of highly perishable things like grapes and strawberries.
So, what does this all mean for us? We've just seen how a simple gelatin base made from agricultural and marine waste can be engineered, tweaked, and cross-linked into a highly durable, high-tech material that actually outperforms conventional plastics in preserving our food. Think about the implications here. These scientific advancements have the real potential to completely wipe petroleum plastics out of our grocery stores. It paves the way for a true circular economy, where the wrapper protecting your food either melts back into the earth harmlessly or safely becomes part of your dinner. Leaving us with one final question to ponder. How soon will this eco-hero become the absolute standard in our own kitchens? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.